everyone, and welcome to Open Your Eyes to the Universe. I'm Gabrielle Martin, and it's a pleasure to have you with us again for another episode. If you're joining for the first time, a very warm welcome, and if you check in every month, well, welcome back. It's great to have you with us, and thanks for coming along. Now, look, tonight I'm particularly mindful of the many people living and working in Australia in lockdown at the moment. So if that means you, then a very special welcome, and I hope things aren't too challenging for you during this lockdown. Open Your Eyes to the Universe is a series of contemporary talks, conversations, open-eyed meditations, and interviews with people who inspire and uplift others by sharing their wisdom, their insights and experiences. Last month on Youniverse, we were in conversation with mathematician Dr. Grace Lopez-Charles, sharing on the topic of deciphering truth and tapping into the inner power of discernment to navigate the truth when it isn't so dazzlingly clear to us as it could be. She was saying that truth is an internal state of being, and the power of introspection is a touchstone within myself where I can know what truth is and where I can feel what truth is. Now, viewers, as always, we welcome your participation and questions, and thanks to those who've sent them in already. If you'd like to ask a question as we move along, please write it in the chat box, and we'll address your we'll address your question in the Q&A. And here we are tonight, and we're taking up the topic conflict solutions with our two guests, speakers, both from Melbourne, Chrissy Mahoney and Niall Fenix. I think many people consider conflict to be part of everyday living and relating. How often do you go to work and say, I had an argument at home last night? Or perhaps you go home and say, I had an argument with my colleague, my friend, my schoolmate today. Or perhaps it's an episode of road rage. And we take it as normal. But does it have to be? The world is heating up with climate change and people are heating up with anger. When you find yourself in a conflict situation, what do you do? Tonight, we're exploring conflict through a spiritual lens as we consider different techniques to resolve conflict. How could I resolve conflict in my life, within myself, or with others? And equally significant, how could I prevent it? What does it take for me to live a more empowered life in harmony with myself and those around me? With tertiary qualifications and professional experience in mediation and meditation, Chrissy Mahoney and Niall Fenix are well placed to lead this conversation tonight. So let me introduce them to you. First up, Chrissy. Now, Chrissy has decades of studying human spirit and a determination to understand why we fight and hurt each other. Chrissy studied for her master's degree in conflict resolution and mediation. She encourages people to find harmony, to empower themselves and develop their creative self whilst engaging in processes of healing and self-awareness. She also continues to pursue spiritual wisdom and investigate the individual and collective potential. Chrissy's been studying and teaching meditation for over 36 years. She is committed to assisting individuals and communities to develop a greater connection with their authentic selves and discover what their valued contribution can be. She's got to have a lifetime interest in people, celebrating the stories that come from our individual journeys. And on another level, and equally compelling, Chrissy studied to be a professional actor at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney here, and worked in theatre, film and TV. She's also worked in the area of organisational change and innovation. So it's very much a compelling combination, isn't it? A mediator, an actress and a meditator. I've watched Chrissy unpack the depths of conflict, internal and external, through her use of theatre and creativity, and highly refined with her understanding of human psychology, gained through many years of studying and practicing meditation. So we'll say hello to Chrissy in a moment, but I'd like to take this moment also to introduce you to Niall. Niall has always had an interest in the dynamics of human behaviour, and ultimately his interests led him to study meditation, psychotherapy and counselling. As a counsellor, he continued his studies for a postgraduate degree in mediation and conflict resolution, with a particular interest in mindful mediation. Subsequently, he furthered his studies for a master's in adult education. Niall's professional interest finally focused on the undermining influence of personal inner conflicts and their legacy effects in the workplace relationships. So, wow, that's really very innovative. Now, I know Niall mainly as a musician and philosopher. He's very much a philosopher at heart, and as a musician, this is expressed strongly in poetry and music. Having studied and taught meditation for 40 years, he now focuses on producing albums of sacred music and spoken word. And we're going to be listening to one or two actually, of his sacred songs tonight. So, my friends Niall and Chrissy, it's divine to have you with us tonight. Thanks for joining us down under on Open Your Eyes to the Universe. I'm here in the Blue Mountains and you're in Melbourne and we're all in lockdown. It's great to be able to welcome you to a COVID safe space of Zoom and YouTube. A very warm welcome to you both.
Thanks so much, Gabriel. It's a delight to be here. I'm speaking first, so I will thank you first. And it's just so liberating to be speaking without a mask.
Totally. So, makes such a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's so free. So lovely to be here with you all and your inquiring minds in regard to conflict, that's been around since living memory, really. Before we start, it's a beautiful tradition to honor the original owners of this land and the custodians, the wise ones, the elders that have passed on the wisdom, the laws, the values and the secrets and the dreaming from generation to generation. So I honor those elders, those ancestors. And in the same way, I'd like to honor the ancient, wise, elder part of yourself that is sitting here this evening, that is present. I'd like to honor the ancient part of yourself, the part that we have put aside, the part of us that is the all-knowing, the all-insightful, peaceful, observant, one that has a huge capacity. And for some reason, we have parked it for the opinions of others, for values that we don't really feel comfortable with. And we have looked to others for answers outside of ourselves. And I was thinking about this whole conversation this evening around conflict. And I think this is the basis of conflict, is the separation from the self, from the, call it the higher self, the all-knowing self, the wise self, it's like an ancient elder that lives within us. And that is the one that will pass on a legacy, that part of ourselves, of how we manage this world in generations to come. We need to lead the way based on that wise, observant, mindful, kind and responsible self for the future, in how I manage myself in the moment. And it's a big ask because we've all been conditioned, we've all been programmed right from the very beginning we're voyeuristic as human beings. We observe, we learn from what we observe. We watch, we learn patterns, we learn responses. And sometimes those responses don't resonate with the deeper, more wise, more respectful part of ourselves. So in order to really manage conflict, because I don't really believe we can resolve it, I think we learn to manage it and then transform it. And I'm more interested, I think, in transforming conflict than resolving it. because I think the transformational process is the one where we gain that wisdom, that experience, and that deep respect for the self and the other with whom I'm in conflict with. So how to do this is a big question. And we're only just, it's a tipping point of it, just a very edge of it this evening that we're addressing. The internet is absolutely full of reading that you can do on understanding the mysterious aspect of conflict, why it happens, why it continues, where it comes from. Because there must have been a time when we lived in greater harmony. And my hope for this world and for myself and all those that I know that is that we will move closer to a place of harmony within ourselves. Once we find that within ourselves, we will have it more with those around us, those we live with, those we love, those we work with, those we pass in the street, or those we deal with in our day-to-day activities. There will be a greater harmony. And a big foundation for that, I would say, would be respect. So inner conflict is probably one of the major sources of conflict with others. It starts within the self, usually with the mind racing and lots of questions coming. Why did they do that? Who do they think they are? I mean, don't they? I mean, how can they treat me like that? So this dialogue starts in the mind, and it builds like this sort of fire. I mean, I don't have much self-respect. My inner world, my inner conflict can start to go a little bit crazy, a bit out of control. And my wiser, my higher self, the elder in me, the ancestral self, just stands silently in the corner and watches this kind of craziness going on. We don't give it space to sit quietly or to consult with it, to that part of ourselves. We don't consult with it and have a conversation or a dialogue. Instead, the mind goes out of control. Why did I say that? I should never have said that. That's really made me look stupid. And so, oh, you're an idiot. You're just an idiot. And you've really blown it now. So all of this inner conversation happens. And I call them the gremlins. You know, they're just like the spoilers that want to come in and paint a picture that isn't the truth. It's like being quiet in your house, in your inner world, and there's all these crazies banging on the front door wanting to come in and have a party. Well, you either don't let them in, or you open the door a bit and say, you have to go away, go away, it's not time, come back tomorrow and we'll have a party. But you have some control. You don't just open the door and let everyone flow in because that's what they want. And the thoughts are a bit like that, or other people's behavior. We can filter it. We can have a choice. We can allow what we let in, what we entertain, and what we park to address for another day. And so that inner self-respect is probably one of the first stepping stones towards the respect for others and the pain they may be suffering, or the confusion they're going through, or the anger they're feeling through fear, through uncertainty, through feeling that maybe you're better than they are and they want to pull you down so they feel better. We're complex beings, and human relationships are multi-layered. And so I'd start with questioning around, how much compassion do I have for myself? How much compassion do I have for the suffering of others? And during my studies, there was one area that I really enjoyed, was learning about conflict escalation, and that conflict does escalate, both in our inner world. It heats up. So if you see escalation as like a heating up, like a spiraling up, and it can start with our thoughts, but it can also start with a small seed with another. something happens, some word was said, a comment was passed, or something wasn't appropriate in the moment, someone shamed you or disregarded you, something happens, but a small seed is planted. And if it's not addressed in the early stages, it will spiral up. And there's a wonderful man called Frederick Glassell, and I've never forgotten him after all these years. We're just his model of that he calls escalating conflict. His name is spelt Glassl, his last name, and it's called Glassell's Foundation for Escalation, Conflict Escalation. And he calls it a 9-step model, but it starts with just a sort of like a freezing, like a discomfort, and you'll know when you feel that. You'll feel like a little change of gear inside the self, and it starts to sort of crank up. It starts to escalate and build fire, build heat. And if we let it keep going, like you don't make that phone call, you don't find a way of having a conversation with that person, trying to understand where the conflict came from, or having a conversation with yourself, trying to understand where it came from, what initiated it. Usually it's some seed within the self that has been triggered, that has been lit, been reignited, been resurfaced from another time. But if we let it spiral, and we see it when it reaches that level 9, that top level, that it's usually into the abyss together. It's usually the suicide bomber. It's usually the totally destructive aspect of conflict that is really hard to return from. It's the I'll never speak to you again, and I'll destroy everything we've ever created together, and I'll destroy myself, and I don't care. And that's the heightened, that's the world wars, that's the disrespect. You've insulted my culture, you've insulted my religion, you've insulted my family, and I'll kill you. And that's another conversation altogether when we reach there. What we're talking more about tonight is the very base beginnings of that escalation, when we do have some power over ourselves, over the self-hurt that we inflict on ourselves through our thoughts, the separation from the all-knowing self, the wise self, and not seeing that in the other, the beauty in the other, or the strength in the other, or the goodness. We just turn away from that, and what we look for in the other is what we get. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Oh, you've experienced it. We've all experienced it, from small children in the schoolyard with our siblings, with our parents. Conflict starts at a very early age, and we learn how to manage it for survival at a very early age. That's what blame is. So I don't have to take responsibility. I can just blame you. It's your fault. And there's no wisdom in that. There's no learning in it. And it's opening an opportunity for a great capacity to learn, to honor the self, to see that there are other generations following you, who will learn from you, who will be watching you, who will be inspired, and be also be guided by the choices that you make in how you manage conflict. I've got two little people here. There's this little person and this little person. And so this little person here says, but I'm right and you're wrong. If only you could understand where I'm coming from, you'd see my point of view. And this little person says, no, I'm right, you're wrong. You have to listen to my point of view, and then you'll understand. And there's this huge sort of argument that goes on between these two people of I'm right, no, I am right, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. You're the one that's got it wrong, and you should listen to me. And what often happens when this argument is going on between these two is the voices get raised, people get louder. And what happens when people are angry is that they can't actually hear each other. When people are angry, they can't hear. So we shout more because we think if I shout, you will actually hear me and you will understand me. And so this is when we actually need to put the pause button on. We need to put the pause on the direction we're going in. And that usually takes one person to initiate that. And what in that space, when we can actually maybe put the pause button on and see a different perspective, is that what we see is that between the, could you hold that little person now? Thank you. Between the two of us is this beautiful common ground. It's this space in between us. Okay, maybe I will always be right. Maybe you will always be right. Maybe I have my point of view, you have your point of view. But there's always something, oops, I'll just go with my hand over here. There's always something in the middle between us that joins us. And there's an organization called In Search of Common Ground who deal with post-war totally destructive communities. And what they try and identify is not who's right or who's wrong or who's going to win or who's going to understand better than the other, is to find out what this common ground is between us, our common humanity, our values, our need for peace, or our need to try and work this out for the children, or come to some way that we can work together and get a better outcome in our workplace, in our family. What is it that we do have in common that we can focus on? And by focusing on that, that's why negotiations work. A good negotiation isn't trying to decide who is right or who is wrong. It's finding that common ground, that common humanity, that desire for things to be more harmonious, to see, okay, well, I'm a neighbor and we're arguing, and really it's affecting our children, it's affecting our lives. Your children, my life, your life, the lives of our household, how are we managing ourselves is what we have in common. And so when we acknowledge that, then we can start to find a way out of this difficult situation. So I think probably I've my basic introduction has come to its time, and so basically, I suppose, just to sum up, what I'm trying to say here is reconnect when there's conflict going on of any kind. Find time for some personal contemplation and connection with that wise elder self within yourself, that part, that ancient part that does know, that is whispering to you wisdom and direction and a way forward through this in a more harmonious, safer way, a more harmonious way, a kinder way, a more healthy way that brings a better outcome for you and for everyone. So that's basically at the very epicenter of what I'm trying to say. So, Gabriel,
Chrissy, that was
do you want
lovely.
to say anything?
Yeah, Chrissy, that was gorgeous. Thank you. I just really loved the way that you acknowledged the wise elder within us. You know, that very forgotten wise elder within, that's, you know, present within each one of us. And I also, of course, really loved the way that you did that as you acknowledged the traditional owners of this land too. And I was also appreciating that, you know, we can learn to manage conflict and then transform it rather than respect, you know, respect for myself and respect for others. And that, you know, this sort of like the inner conflict is one of the major sources of conflict with others. So, you know, my internal landscape will signal or indicate the level of harmony or disharmony that I have with others. So very, very nice. And really acknowledging how multi-layered human relationships are, but saying, look, let's start with how much compassion do I have for myself and how much compassion do I have for others. And because I like the way that you brought it right down to we didn't go right out there to the big conflicts, but that conflict can start with just our thoughts or with a small seed with others. And I think you're absolutely right. There's times when, all of us have felt shamed, and when we've shamed others as well. And that's that seed, and to watch that seed, because it can escalate. And, before you know it, you're up there at a 9, a level 9, I think you said, where it's, completely off the radar of being able to ever resolve or manage even. So it's very nice. You made it very simple for us to really grasp that stuff. And I was also appreciating that point about the blame factor, that we manage conflict from childhood, or the way that so many of us have learned to manage conflict in childhood is to blame. It's your fault, or blame someone or something, and how much that just removes us from any responsibility or being able to move into a state of harmony
and wisdom,
and of course that the wisdom, wisdom, and that lovely little message at the end too. You just said it just takes one person to push the pause button, put the pause button on. Just someone has to do it, and then there's the chance to open up for some common ground, the common humanity. And it may be not you're moving right out of right or wrong then, and you're moving into look, what have we got in common that we can work together with harmoniously? And so some very gorgeous key messaging coming through there, Chrissy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Is there anything further that you'd like to add to that?
Me, you asking me or everyone?
Yeah, I wondered if there's anything further that you wanted to say.
I think it's coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just listening to you recap it as well, Gabriel. It's it's coming down from, others can bring you down. I remember working in a theatre company, and people can become very complacent. In complacency, we become careless, because if you've got that kind of comfort of an ongoing contract, it can just sort of settle into a sort of a consciousness of complacency, which can lead to carelessness, which can lower standards a little. I remember there's a great theatre director called Peter Brook, who I always, held in high esteem. And I was lucky enough during a festival here to speak to him, because I was performing in it and his company was performing. And I said to him, what do you do when you're a team member and you want to stay part of that collective, that team, and but the values are, are just not, kind of conflicting with my own values? Do I bring myself to work in harmony with their values, or, come down, or do I sort of maintain my own, what I call more responsible values? And he said, never lower yourself to come down to the standard of others. Maintain, even if it means that you're isolated or separate, maintain your own standards, your own values, and let others come up to you. I know it can be seen as a bit of arrogance sometimes, so it depends on how you represent that. But if you do it with humility and not wanting to push others into what the way you are, then you can make an influence just by leading, I suppose, by maintaining it, not coming down. And I think that's a really important value to maintain in the self, to say, well, what am I prepared to compromise here? What am I prepared to? Because if you come down, you're kind of, it's a bit of a bun fight. It's a bit of a a kind of a mud wrestling. If we're both on the same. One has to sort of try and sort of maintain a higher consciousness, really. Aim, at least aspire, even if you're in pain, aspire to uplifting this circumstance, even if out of all of this horrible situation I'm in, or this bullying, or this painful situation I'm in, I can come out with the wisdom of experience and a better person and a wiser person, because there has to be some value in it, and in it all there has to be a good outcome. And because often what we get so brokenhearted about and conflicted about is that we have expectations of others that they can't always fulfill. And so it's part of that shaming, it's part of that blaming, that if I have expectations of others to be what I think they should be, or how they should be performing in this role, or how they should be acting towards me, then that's going to create a conflict. I mean, I'm sure we all know what causes conflict, but the secrets and what we're trying to tap into here is how do we transform them into something it's like an alchemy, transforming it from lead into gold, from recalibrating the frequency of the energetic exchange between us. It's removing the rust, the corrosion that has happened in our relationship. So what removes that corrosion? Higher consciousness, taking responsibility for the self. This all starts to turn the energetic frequency that is happening between us and calming it. But someone has to take responsibility. And as long as we wait for you to change and you to wake up to yourself and you to start behaving differently, then we're going to start getting somewhere. Okay, it's you are the one. You start, just manage yourself. You start up there, see yourself, goodness sake, just see the way you're carrying on. Then we can have a conversation. It's not going to work.
This is the dialogue that's universal now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Dan Andrews' folder, it's the politician's folder, it's Boris's folder, it's Donald Trump, it's someone else's.
It is, isn't it? But I do like the way that you're really describing the quiet leader here. The quiet leader that doesn't abandon the ancestor, the elder within themselves, and doesn't and stays true to their own integrity and their own sense of values. That's very gorgeous, isn't it?
It creates a sort of charisma,
doesn't it?
You can't underestimate that sort of. It's a kind of a presence that starts to build in the self. When the self has a connection to that inner elder, the wise one, the ancestral self, there's a sort of a presence that is it's a strength. Some people want to bring it down, some people will want to destroy it and attack it, but overall it cannot be ignored.
And some people might find it a beautiful model. It might awaken that wisdom and that sense of ancestry within themselves.
I had a family conflict in my own personal life, and I had a moment where I could have reacted, but I knew the children were standing around, the next generation, they were watching me to see what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I harmonized it. I just put the pause on for a minute. And I had to choose a higher way of responding because I knew it was going to have some effect on them.
Yeah.
That's the elder. That's the wise. That's the one taking responsibility for the generations to come.
I mean, they're the big breakthrough moments, aren't they? On all levels when we do that.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here. How are you responding to these sorts of things? What's going on in your mind at the moment?
Yes, I'm listening, and I'm asking myself similar questions. Look, I how did I come to conflict? Having an interest. Well, I came to conflict, like most people, as a conflict avoider, and I was working as a drug and alcohol counselor, and the model I was working with in the agency I was working with was harm minimization. So we weren't working with clients towards abstinence. We were trying to keep them safe. And in spending time very closely with people, I came to observe what Freud called intra-psychic conflict, the conflict itself that Chrissy was referring to. And I wasn't really conscious of it. I didn't labor over it in myself or labor over it in the recognition of others. until that point. And I became intrigued and fascinated by those, in fact, all of us who do something knowing that what we're doing is wrong or is harmful even to ourselves, but having an inability or a refusal to actually make a change. And so this area of the conflict itself, I started to explore. As I have in my own life, I've followed my interests really for most of my life. I've been lucky. And eventually I went and studied it formally, conflict resolution. But in reviewing the big picture, what I'm going to share with you is, my interests, which is philosophical as well as from a practitioner point of view. And also to look at possibly the three areas that have my interest. One is personal, intrapsychic conflict, the conflict itself. The other is interpersonal with other people, in the sense how we get on, the dynamics in the family, in the workplace. And the last area is conflict with nature, Mother Nature, the elements. And in my lifetime, I've come to become sensitive, aware, and sort of, in a sense, called to trying to unpack and see if I can participate in those places with some sense of knowing. And I suppose really, like most people, I'm pursuing the trinity of life, which is understanding identity, purpose, and meaning, and trying to find a place where I can dwell in there that aligns my interests into my practices, basically. And I did find it with these areas. And in many respects, it's kind of a spiritual science that I've tried to understand my part and the part of all of us. So how did I come to this place? I look back, I'm a great studier of history, and I started to understand, I suppose, and accept, as many people do, that in the 1700s, we start with the separation of church and state when science comes into the ascendancy. So it's starting to come into its own power, from Galileo and Copernicus, worldviews start to change. And even though I'm born into a family in the west coast of Ireland in the 1950s, where the legacy of the church has dominion and power over the state, what we've seen subsequently is the separation. Most of us live in a secular world, even though there are, in a sense, theocratic parts of the world that still exist. But by and large, we live in a secular place, and we're allowed to make it up as we go along. So we've devolved from the great books, the great meta-narratives. So one of the greatest ones of all was called the Manu Shastri, which was the guiding book of rules and principles in Hinduism and Jainism. I was born into a culture where the Ten Commandments and the Bible influenced and governed and informed people's actions and reactions. And of course, across all of the cultural, religious traditions, we have laws and books which captured in great detail how we should behave. Now, fast forward to the point of contemporary society, and we're in a kind of free zone where you make it up as you go along, basically, in the sense that our personalized freedom, this sense of the individual over the collective, has allowed and facilitated certain behaviors and patterns which are difficult to remediate. And it costs a lot for society to try and put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Usually, in economic terms, it can take up to 11 times as much to fix a problem later in life as it is to, in a sense, deal with it holistically in the beginning. So what we have really is the end result of storytelling and how it's changed over millennia, to the point where at the moment, through, contemporary media, social media, you can make up anything, you can believe in anything, and you could push forward that sense of being connected to your version of reality, your truth. Now, this is real breeding ground for conflict, really, because, as Freud reminded us, when you're conflicted from within, then your perception has distortion, and everything can start to amplify out of that. When we come communal or enter the workplace, then it becomes a contested space for ideas, opportunities, and propositions, in a sense. So if I'm coming from a place where I can't internally see or review, if I don't subscribe to what was once considered historically some part of Dharma that I should live by, some overarching rule, some understanding, and I'm only in there for a free-for-all for what I can get, then it is an opportunity for these underground situations to start to flame up. And the stories I tell myself create my own reality and my own truth. That's usually a subset from childhood of the stories I've been told and the stories I start to tell other people. So there is a sense that if we live a life free from any overarching deep wisdom, there is a sense that there is a price to pay, in a sense. And where I found myself with people was to try and understand how perhaps I could start to make a difference, to unpack my own life, find skills, and particularly with conflict coaching, training, and resolution, what you're trying to do is move people from a place of emotion into a place of skill. We really have to try and, silo the sense of all the time being amplified by emotion, where we're trying to help each other to reestablish equanimity, understanding that really this old-fashioned word called conscience is the great mediator of the internal psyche, and trying to bring away into that place with people who are deeply wounded from the conflict stories of the family of origin, through the difficulty of the exposure towards various types of educational systems, to the point where they get married or enter the workplace. The only way I've found to enter into those places with others is to try and reestablish trust. If it's the one thing I've learned in life, is that trust is broken deeply in most of the people that I meet. And I found that when I meet people and I'm working with them, in order to enter into this contract of trust between us, you have to be quiet, because people have to sense you. They have to get a sense of it's in their interest, our shared interest, to be guided into a place where you can work together. And so I find my practice as an individual, my understanding of my part of the equation is about preparing to be with others in a way where I can establish, I suppose, some sense of deep listening, presence, quietness, no sense of dissonance in my thoughts, because I'll amplify that and I'll set off a chain reaction. So myself and Chrissy for 13, 14, 15 years have been training people. And a lot of our training really is you don't get the opportunity to prepare. You walk into a room and it's on, in a sense. You're with people for 4 hours, and it's a training in trying to prepare people to work with difficult people. So they're frontline workers that get a lot of abuse. They get flamed. So what we try to do is help them get in touch with their triggers, where they do an inventory deeply of their life and start to own the areas where their part of the story lies. Mm-hmm. That's our work, in a sense, and trying to seed this type of behavior in order to hopefully amplify that as some sort of vocational commitment across society. But look, we find ourselves in a variety of situations. And as I said, the individual's work, the journey back into the equilibrium of discovering a sense of conscience, working with others, and the last part, really, working with nature is so kind of sad for me because of what I've seen. I've lived in Australia for 40 years, and I've observed the loss of biodiversity and the destruction of habitat for a country of its size that was reasonably underpopulated. We've done, a tremendous job in destruction, and I feel that the symphony of nature is really about to come back and, in a sense, with its own voice, to remind us of our part in its destruction. I believe there's an intelligence in nature that has been so disabused and disrespected that we will have to accept what it delivers as its response. And I mean, this is nothing new in terms of sacred ecology, and we're seeing, in a sense, the emergence. And it's a bit like the light that we take for granted every day. Now, it's been traveling for years before it reaches us. Similarly, conflict and its fruit has been embedded for so long across millennia that at some point, the tipping points of the result of our amplification, our disturbances in our relationships, and the consequences across animals and nature has to be borne out, in a sense. And that's where I think we are at. We're at that sort of precipice of recognition. And I return, to my starting point. What can I do? What can we do? I think, first of all, we have to hopefully canvas the opportunity to develop a merciful heart. And it's very difficult, actually, to have mercy on yourself, to journey in and own your own part and see your part. I'm part of a transplanted culture, the European culture, that is now living in the South Pacific. What type of interactions do I have with First Nations people? What type of ideas do I hold about them? And what about this place that I've called home for so long, that has been so generous to me? It's given me so much. And what can I do to remediate, in a sense, and to try and put right what I consciously and unconsciously have contributed? So there's a little vignette that I heard a number of years ago, and it's the story of a Cherokee Indian chief First Nations from North America. And he was observing the European migration into the US, the taking of land, the expansion into the Midwest. And he was in council with his tribe. And he was saying, he said, the human heart is in a war with two wolves that exist within us. The first wolf contains deep anger, a deep darkness, and a malevolence. The other wolf contains light, hope, and a sense of compassion. So one brave in his tribe asks the chief, where will victory be with these wolves? And the chief says after a pause, victory is within the one that you feed. And I think this is, in a sense, where we've come to. We have to take responsibility with this extreme tension that existed in the metaphors within all of the great traditions that talked about the fall of man from some sort of higher state of consciousness to the sense of, being entrusted with paradise, and how we've mocked it up, essentially, how we've gone completely feral and have an inability to see our part in where I, the individual, my relationships, and my capacity to commune with nature, where that actually is at the moment. We really have to accept with mercy the journey, the pilgrimage into my own heart, to make a sense of change, to do the best I can do in addressing these three areas. And central to that is really working with the spiritual science of identity, purpose. Why am I here? What is life about? And finding pursuits of meaning making beyond just the transactional opportunity to make money for money's sake. This has been the great triumph of materialism. It's created a world market. If nothing else, that's what it's done. It's created all of us consumers. And the result of that is that we just consume everything. All that nature provides is just, there is no sustainability about it. But yet, what gives me hope is, friends who open shelters for animals, people who work with recovering kids from broken homes, domestic abuse, people who actually prioritize their life, their energy and their time to try and ameliorate those areas which reflect and amplify what I believe to be the root cause of conflict, which is the conflicted self that is fixable. We can remediate it once we prioritize it and want to do it. We want, do we want to do this work, basically? And that's all it really is. It's a conviction. It's a sense of, actually, it's a shared interest. This is our contract to recognize, to move beyond the binary of right and wrong and, interests and needs. It's the basic stuff that we learn, Chrissy and I, when we're learning how to mediate. And these are basic, sort of scientifically proven steps and methodologies. But at its heart is really the sense of learning to disarm that part of the critic, the one who likes to spoil and affect, so yeah, this is my area of interest. This is how I found myself in this kind of subject, and I'm happy to talk about it. As an Irishman, I can talk underwater, so please, we'd be happy to have some questions.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks, Gabriel. Thank you.
Thanks, Niall. Thanks very much. There's a lot in that actually, and I felt myself really moving to what you were saying there around, the so many people avoid conflict, and that was how you got involved in that intrapsychic conflict or the conflicted self. And I really love the way that you brought in nature. So yes, of course, the conflict with interpersonal conflict and conflict with others, but then coming into this whole understanding of conflict with nature, and how important it is for us to really look at that and what we're doing in our world at the moment with nature and how it is responding, and it just the way you moved us through history there a little bit. I felt that was really grounding, how you can see that when we've had boundaries that have either been placed around us because of church or Judaism or Jainism or Hinduism, whatever it is, but some kind of religious or philosophical discourse that's grounded us in laws and ways of behaving. And then, moving now into a very postmodern world. In fact, I think you could almost call it a post-human world, contemporary society where, we're making it up as we go along, and what that means in social development. Like, I think you said something like 11 times more resources to deal with a problem in your life after it's happened, as it is if you dealt with it when it arose. And this whole thing around, the concept of your truth and how that's a breeding ground. And I'd like to, the way that you brought it right back to that lovely old-fashioned word called conscience, that, that's the great mediator of the psyche. And then, she enlightened us with things like, it's re-establishing trust as being a great way to heal, and an essential component to healing and mediating, and how it is that trust is so deeply broken in, I guess, in all of us, really. I can't think of anyone that I know who hasn't had their trust broken. And then that thing around, Chrissy was talking about it too, that importance for very deep, deep listening and stillness and presence as a way of re-engaging with ourselves authentically and with others. Some lovely, very lovely, deep points coming through there, Niall. Thank you very much. A lot to treasure and a lot to think about as well. There was no small serve. It was deep, it was rich, there was a lot in it. So thank you for that. Look, I know we've got lots of questions, but what I'd like to do before we take questions, if you're happy with this, I'd love to go into a meditation together. And the one I'm going to suggest is off an album called The Seed of Love. And it's actually the work of Chrissy and Niall. Both together have created a beautiful meditation album called The Seed of Love. And this one is called Love, Unity, Silence. So let's enjoy that together and allow it to wash over us and really feel what's being spoken.
love, unity, silence. Where there is love, hope and enthusiasm will be there. A loving soul will always have a big heart. Large matters become small. What can the power of love not do? A special star shines in the sky. Everyone's attention is drawn to it. Where will this star sparkle first? Where there is courage, the light of hope spreads to those who have no hope. Like flying birds on the wings of courage and enthusiasm, you fly to wherever you wish. By having courage, you kindle one lamp with another. When effort is made with love, the fruit that emerges is very good. What can the power of love not do? Cooperation is there. No matter the situation, unity comes first. You need a gathering of love. Through that, success will be seen. Unity produces fruit, even on stony ground. When the land is watered with love, it will produce huge and tasty fruit. What can the power of unity not do? If someone experiences silence for even 1 minute, that silence will pull them again and again. Everyone wants peace. When a soul experiences love and peace, they are continually attracted by it. Everyone wants peace. Love, unity, silence. What can the power of silence not do? The power of silence.
Something very precious, isn't there, about moments of silence together and moments of meditation together. I sincerely hope that you felt that silence come through and that sacred music and also the words spoken. Chrissy and Niall, we have a lot of questions and we have a lot of comments going on of appreciation for what you've shared. So let's start with some questions. First one is, can you tell me something about karma and conflict and blame and empowerment? Now, I'm going to leave it to either of you to answer that, as you see, as you'd like to, whoever feels inspired.
Beautiful question. Wow. There was a book written called Liquid Modernity. I think from University of Leeds sociology department. And I was struck by some of the ideas. So what I've observed in my own lifetime is the movement to a digital world platform and this huge sense of liquidity, the amount of money that circulates around the world. And traditionally in the stock market, there was a settlement process. Every day, whatever transactions of buying and selling stocks, there was a process developed called settlement. And that is extrapolated out towards some phenomenal algorithms these days in order to settle world markets. In a sense, conflict, in my mind, is a settlement process. I don't have to know the details of the algorithm to know that there is some scales of justice in settlement. It's very difficult to talk about because straight away somebody will present you with the most illogical, extreme example in order to, I suppose, challenge your opening into that level of consideration. For me, I have to say that things that are unjust will be corrected. I refer to the conscience. I believe it's a mediator that holds the settlement of my consciousness, even if I'm unconscious to it. My karma has to be settled at some point. Am I conscious of being able to draw a thread of understanding between action and outcome? No, I'm not. I don't have that level of spiritual intelligence. But I suppose I operate somewhere in the middle with regarding some sense of fate. I'm not a police person. I will not prosecute my sense of right and wrong. I've come to a sense of accepting that it will be taken care of. I referred to my talk about the symphony of nature, and I genuinely believe that the rumblings and the soundings that we're hearing across Mother Nature, increasingly in the last 20, 25 years, is and will be a profound symphony that is its answer to the injustices and the deep wounds that it has absorbed as a result of the tension, the competition between humankind and the resources of nature. So yes, I believe in a settlement. I believe in a process that is intelligently managing that. That's honestly all I can say. Chrissy?
Thank you.
I want to, the
Chrissy,
second
did you
part of the
make a comment?
question. The second part was about power and
It was,
blame.
yeah, it was about, the second part was about blame and empowerment.
Well, I think it sort of says it for itself, really, that in blame, there's no wisdom. In blame, there's no personal empowerment. I think blame is just stonewalling in a way. It's avoidance. It's not seeing the bigger picture. It takes courage and enormous capacity to pull the self back when there's hurt, insult, where you feel threatened, where you feel absolutely diminished by someone or something or situation. And so initially there feels, in order to protect myself, then it's easier to blame the other and feel like I'm okay, it's them. And if they were more like this, I'd be all right. If they'd treated me like this, then I would be all right. The situation wouldn't have happened if they hadn't done this. And that's just transfers. It's a transference. And maybe it's true. They might have initiated it. They might have been, it's maybe true, but it's not going to take it anywhere but down. And also, I think in the blame situation, it's also it just creates a sort of it's the very basis of the escalation. It's just going to go more and more, just become more and more destructive, and the return will be very little for the energy that's been put in. And at some stage, as Niall was saying about settlement, it's going to have to, but it won't leave you alone. That's the awful thing. If you leave it walk away in a state of blame in order to sort of self-preservation, then it's always going to haunt you.
Well, to add, I'm not proposing that one should be a passive observer of injustice. If something is wrong, you say, stop it. It's wrong. And you do something to either prevent it, you minimize and prevent harm straight away. And you action something to keep yourself and your loved ones.
Remove yourself.
Yeah, safe. So, it's not a sense of misplaced passivity about our perception of threat and harm. But behind all of that, there are governing laws which rule the universe and are deeply about the accountability of behavior. And though we have lost a sense of knowing about it, doesn't mean that the strong possibility that this accountability is still in existence.
I think blame can immobilize you. So I'm not saying that you don't see a truth, or you can't see the reality of what's going on, and also go into that wiser experienced self to know what do I do here? You know, what is the best possible outcome that I can make in this moment? But blame immobilizes us, disempowers us, and disengages us from our inner knowing and making the right decision.
Thank you. Some key points coming through there. Thank you both for your responses. We've got another one question that is, and it goes like this: where is God? What are they up to?
Can you just say that question again? It was just slightly breaking up a little.
Sure. The question is, where is God in all of this global conflict? What about the divine? What about the divine? What are they up to?
It's a great question. I'd love to hear your answer to that, you know, whoever asked it. So, well, what do you think? Obviously, you suspect that there's something out there. But Niall, do you want to say anything first? Where is God and the divine ones in all this global conflict?
I understand from a rational point of view, particularly as I've mentioned, post-enlightenment, it's easy to blame God or not have any sense of where God is when you see the suffering and the level of injustice in the world. It's a difficult one to question. My own sense of where God is that God is the observer of the sense of mystery and theater, and is bound by some of the deep spiritual laws that we are also bound by. I'm not sure that God is an intervener in the way that we would like God to do. I remember as a child, like asking, this bargaining that I would go on in my head about if I would get away with something, God help me with this at the moment. And as soon as I managed to get my way out of it, I'd forget about God and move on to the next conquest. And, there's a sense that where is God? I think God is the one that gives the sense of capacity, the mercy to manage and deal with the extremities of our participation. I'm not sure God is the creator in the Judeo-Christian sense of the world is created and or destroyed. I think in the great mythology stories, God's plan for us is to, in a sense, see the majesty of our capacity and to help us find mercy in our deepest shameful periods, because really there is great spiritual power, intelligence, and heart within the capacity of all human beings. And I think it's that sense that the game is about, our capacity to find love in each other and to help each other out of a world that we have created for ourselves. And we're bound by the natural law to recover that sense and or to settle the consequences of the world that we find ourselves in. So yeah, I'm not a God blamer, but yeah, God is a bit of a mystery. There's no doubt about it.
Can I just put in a quick answer to that too? I said before, when you're angry, when someone is angry, they can't hear you. And because there's so much heat going on in their head that they actually can't hear. It's a fact that and so I think because the world is full of so much anger and so much fear, even if God was roaring, they wouldn't hear. And so I think the presence is constantly there, but we are so not tuned in. And I remember once when I was quite young, I was working at the South Australian Theatre Company and walking through the railway station with another actor after a show, there was this fight, blue going on between this man and a woman. They were arguing and arguing. This friend of mine walked up and tried to sort of protect this woman and defend her. And she turned around and said, "Piss off and mind your own business." And it was like, it was such a shock because she was the one that was just sort of like, leave me alone. They didn't want help. They wanted to, tear each other, like there wasn't a physical, but it was very close to, and they were really into it, fighting, and they had no interest in outside help. And if God is there as a presence, as a frequency, as a pulsating vibration, but we want to have it out and we want to express ourselves, like, take to the streets or, express it. We don't want an intervener. We don't want any interference. So there's just an energetic block. And they say this, the sun is always there. Clouds pass over, but it's not that the sun goes away. It's there. It's just where we turn to, where we put our focus.
It's a lovely analogy. Thanks, Chrissy. I'm going to move into another 2 or 3 more questions before we finish up, if I can. One's a comment. I've noticed that in this lockdown, there's much more stress and pressure and conflict, yet people are doing their best to be kind and strong and not get into conflict. I also noticed that even though there's quite a lot of fear, there's also reduced noise in my area, a nice kind of stillness outside, which I have been finding quite peaceful, and I like to focus on this. What do you think?
Lovely. It's great that you're doing that.
Yeah. Do you want to comment?
I I think it's again where you put your focus, where a choice that you make. It's and it's also the collective consciousness, which I suspect is part of what has created this the human state that we're in. Is we've underestimated the power of the collective consciousness and the energy that sends out. And so it just also depends on who and what we tune into. We hear the silence, or we feel that silence is peaceful, regenerative, nurturing, healing, or we feel it as lonely, as confronting, as pressure, as it just depends on the interpretation of what is. We can see conflict as suffering, or we can see it as settlement, or we can see it as the getting of wisdom. We can see it as becoming resilient and strong, and choosing a better way, an opportunity to choose a better way. And one of the greatest obstacles to creativity and innovation and newness and possibilities is fear. Fear limits and completely immobilizes spontaneity and that creative energy. So we tend to shut down once we feel fear and uncertainty. We become immobilized and shut down, and it creates a false sense of silence. It's like a pressure cooker that's going to explode. So that's where we choose how I interpret what's going on, what is in my control, and what's part of the bigger collective.
Thanks, Chrissy. There's another question coming through here. How can I take my emotions seriously without being overwhelmed by them?
I think being the observer is very important. We are our greatest teacher. Life is an amazing capacity. We are emotional beings, and not to give the self a hard time for feeling those emotions, but being, intelligent around them. If you're really, really, if it's really something that you feel you need to evolve in and learn from, then I would be looking at all the different advice around emotional intelligence, and do some research on it for yourself, because I think sometimes we see emotions as a bad thing, or or a limiting thing or a problem, but we are emotional beings, and it's how we manage them in the right place at the right time with the right people, you know, under the right circumstances. So it's when emotions are out of control, and we have no control over them, and the emotions are controlling us, which then triggers off emotions in others, creates this emotional storm, and can't think, don't know what direction. It just becomes heightened emotions, like running crazy. So it's it's observing them, knowing them when they're starting to rise up, what the triggers are, knowing what the triggers will be. I better walk away from this now because I know my emotions, this triggers my emotions. Certain different ones go off at different times. And and monitor the self, manage the self, be kind, lead the self away from what you know is going to end up as something that's going to be out of control.
I'd also just to add to what Chrissy says is to be careful where you do this work of processing. Mental health is very fragile, and we're all capable of being tipped over one way or the other. So choosing a place that where you're grounded, that provides you with an energetic space to manage your thoughts. So if you're doing it indoors, it can be confined. It can amplify your thought pattern, and it can lead to a sense of a spiral. So if this work is really important, where you're examining and you're starting to look at your regulation, how to self-regulate positively, you know, try and do it in a park near the beach where you're getting the energetic sense of working with you, so that you don't displace your equilibrium by too much heat, too much thinking, and as a result your moods can shift. You know, the energy around you in nature will support your inquiry and your regulation, and will help you.
It's beautiful. Look, we have so many more questions and we've run out of time, and I'm giving my apologies in advance to those who have questions and we haven't had an opportunity to ask or put them to Chrissy and Niall. So my apologies for that. But a big thanks to Chrissy and to Niall. I think we've been in the company tonight of two very, very wise elders. So a huge thanks to both of you for joining us on Youniverse and sharing your wisdom with us. So our love and our blessings to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A little wave goodbye to you. But hang in there for a moment. To our viewers, it's lovely. To our viewers, look, thanks for going with Chrissy's. Come to say goodbye as well. But look, to our viewers, thanks very much for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time to ask them all. As usual, if you'd like to browse our online bookshop, Eternity Inc., it is full of online range of books on self-empowerment and self-development and spirituality, and they're always at not-for-profit prices. Now look out for The Seed of Love. That's the CD that's composed by Niall, the music composed by Niall, and the words are spoken by Chrissy. And we played that beautiful beautiful track called Love, Unity and Silence. And we're going to finish tonight with one of Niall's songs too. So you'll find those in the Eternity Inc. bookshop as well. If you'd like to subscribe to Open Your Eyes to the Youniverse to receive monthly updates, please email us at special.events@au.brahmakumaris.org. And finally, I'd like to tell you about our next episode of Open Your Eyes to the Youniverse. Carolyn Ward will be back to anchor, and she'll be in conversation with writer Barbara Bossett-Ramsey. Barbara is an actor, a singer, and a writer whose life focus changed when she found spiritual answers she didn't know she was looking for. And in her words, being able to express my spiritual journey in my writing and performing is a great privilege. The times when the writing seems to come from somewhere outside of me, when something almost demands to be written, are times of very deep happiness. And this is when I feel that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So she's the writer of the highly acclaimed play, The Accidental Mystic, which had extended sessions in Australia, London, New York, and India. And her children's book, Finding the Magic, became and continues to be a focal point for human development programs. Next month on Youniverse, she's sharing her work, Turnings. It's a story that opens the doors in your mind. Time carries us through eternity, and eternity carries us through time. And Turnings is an invitation to listen to the sound of time, to hear the story, and to hear your story. And Turnings is accompanied by a brilliant musical soundtrack by David Jones and the Peace Collective. So that's next month, Saturday, the 28th of August, 6 p.m. on Youniverse with Barbara Bossett-Ramsey and the story of time, Turnings. So please join us. So as I close out tonight, we'll play a song from Nile. As I mentioned, you can tell anyway, he's very much a deep philosopher, and his music's imbued with his philosophy. So this is off an album called Burret Lullabies. He has another album too called Songlines of Burret. I think you'll appreciate them both. The one we're going to play as we close out is Burret Lullabies, and the track is called Circles. So absorb it into your soul. And until next month, take care. May you live a more empowered life in harmony with myself, yourself, and those around you. Om Shanti.
Time it moves in circles, and the beginning is like the end. I know that I've been with you there. You're more than just my friend. Out in the cold, cold winter, we served our discontent, till the wings of fate brought us here, just to finally see the end, as you bring love, hope, soothing words from up above. You bring light, fill all our needs, lift us up. These small steps we take, guided by your hand, I know, across the sands of time, every woman and man we go, till somewhere out of the blue, change starts coming true. I know we'll return one day. Come what may, you bring love, hope, soothing words from up above. You bring light, fill all our needs, lift us up. And if the darkness falls on me, to your light and love I turn, just to set us free. Just to set us free. Time it moves in circles, and the beginning is like the end. And I know that I've been with you there. You're more than just my friend. Out in the cold, cold winter, we served our discontent, till the wings of faith brought us here, just to finally see an end, as you bring love, hope, soothing words words from up above. You bring light, fill all our needs, lift us up.